Justin Trudeau gave away a lot of your money to companies this year in the form of cash. This week, I sat in on industry committee for something called main estimates. So part of my role as a parliamentarian is to review how much money the government spends and then hold them to account for that spending. And so ministers are supposed to appear in front of parliamentary committee to answer basic questions about the money they spent. This week, I sat in front of Minister Navdeep Bains. He's the guy in charge of the quote-unquote industry department, and I asked him some pretty basic questions about how much money he was spending. Watch what happened.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, for the period covered by these estimates, what's the total amount of direct grants and contributions made to for-profit enterprises by all of the departments within your signing authority?
So, based on the amounts that we have here in the 2018-2019 estimates, the total portfolio amount is $7.8 billion. And you're specifically looking for grants?
Made to for-profit enterprises, grants and contributions.
Companies that actually have a return, not non-for-profit, but
Right.
for-profit. Okay, so I'll get you that specifically. We have different grants within different portfolios. I'll get you that sum momentarily.
Okay. And of that number, how much went to female-led businesses?
Again, I will have to get you that number momentarily.
How much went to non-Canadian-owned businesses?
Again, we'll have to get you that number. We'll definitely break that information out
So
for you. So you're looking for international
Well,
investments
I'm trying
and
to
domestic
figure out
investments?
how much money you directly gave to companies.
Well, again, we'll get the exact amount, but we have different ways, primarily through grants and loans as repayable contributions. Those are the two mechanisms that we have.
Sure. So, I mean, some of the budgetary figures that we've seen, $372 million for Bombardier, $35 billion for the Infrastructure Bank. I just would like to know how much money, since we're at the main estimates,
Yeah. So the
you've
main
given
estimate,
to companies.
yeah. So there's two components. There's an operating component to the main estimates, which is like the baseline.
Yes,
the
I know.
personnel. Yeah, and I'm just saying
realize.
that. Yeah. So there's a grants and contributions. So we're just
So
going
how
to get
much
those.
grants and contributions did you give to for-profit enterprises, including all of the sub-departments?
It's a great question. We'll get to that to you momentarily. I'm just asking my officials to get that number for me.
So, Mr. Nubley, do you know what that amount is?
As we say, we'll get back to you with the exact number. Yeah.
How much money are you giving to companies?
I can't answer that question. As we indicated, we'll have to come back to you
But
with
why?
that.
So the whole argument that has been made is that with the superclusters and this and that is that if we give money to companies that there will be jobs created. So what I'm trying to do is figure out as a parliamentarian at the main estimates how much money you've given to companies and how many jobs have been created. So can you tell me how much money you've given to companies?
So if I may, as I indicated, the total amount for the portfolio is $7.8 billion, of which we will siphon off and determine exactly the amount that you're requesting, and we'll make sure we provide you with a job number as well.
Mr. Nubley, do you have that number?
No, I do not.
So we don't know how much money you've given to companies so far, and
No, we're just going to get you the accurate number.
okay. Do you have it yet?
No, we're going to get that to you momentarily.
Well, you're just sitting there.
Yes, so our officials is making sure we get you the correct number.
To
We'll get you that
clarify,
number.
you as the minister in charge of signing off on this don't know how much money you've spent on
No,
companies.
I do know. You
Okay,
asked for
then
a
what is
specific
it?
number, and we'll get you that number momentarily.
So I'm at the end of my time, I think.
You are.
Do we have the answer to that?
We'll get you that momentarily.
Move to Ms. Rempel. You have 5 minutes, please.
Great. So do we have the numbers?
So the number you were asking for was of the total $7.8 billion, how much goes to grants and contributions?
Actually, my question
Yeah, grants
was,
and contributions.
no, of the, for the period covered by these estimates,
Yep.
what was the total amount of direct contributions made to for-profit enterprises by all of the departments within your signing authority? So
Yeah.
not the 7.8, the entire portfolio.
Yeah, so that all
Okay.
those make up the entire portfolio.
Okay.
So that's just want to clear that we have
Okay.
the same premise. Of that, $5.5 billion is attributed to direct grants and contributions for all the portfolios combined.
To for-profit enterprises.
Correct.
So $5.5 billion to for-profit enterprises.
Correct.
And how many jobs, full-time private sector jobs, were created?
Pardon?
Out of how many full-time private sector jobs were created in that time period for that expenditure?
So we're getting the specific breakup, but overall, I would say definitely tens of thousands of jobs have been created. I
In
just
what
highlighted an
indus-
example
in
for
what
Linamar, for
industries?
example. Oh, in all industries,
But,
because
well, call me skeptical. Like, do you have an exact number of jobs? I mean,
no, we're working on that to get you the specific number. But I
mean,
can tell you right now, the $5.5 billion has led to tens of thousands of jobs that have been
but
created.
where?
And across the economy.
But where?
Where do you want me to look?
Give me
Pardon?
what industry? Like, where were
Name
those?
me an industry.
So how many jobs were created, let's say, in Alberta with the $5.5 billion?
So that's not an industry, that's
Okay.
a region.
Yeah, but you asked me where.
So since the last election, since 2015, over 600,000 jobs have been created in the Canadian economy. The vast majority are full-time jobs.
Yeah, but I
in
asked-
Alberta, if I may please complete my sentence, in Alberta, more than 50,000
I
jobs
don't
have been
think you're.
created.
I don't think
You
you're.
asked for Alberta, so
but I
I'm
asked
giving-
from the five. You spent $5.5 billion and you gave that to companies. I'm asking you, of that money, how many jobs were created from that money that you can say, I spent that money. Here's a job.
Like I said, if you want to look at an overall record, since we formed government, over 600,000 jobs have been created.
No,
the vast majority are full-time.
So the
But like to-
economy creates jobs, right?
Correct.
So I'm asking.
That's a great point you raised. So, let me highlight that point to you.
No,
So
I
when we
want an
make these
answer to my
investments,
question.
It's
You-
not directly related to this. It's also
oh, wait,
leveraging
so-
private sector support as well.
So you said that the growth in the economy is not directly related to the
No,
5
this is
point-
partially. We create the
But
conditions.
how much? Like where? Like you said, tens of thousands.
50,000 jobs in Alberta.
But directly related to the $5.5 billion.
Partly related to this, yes.
So
there's
how
not
much
one direct
partly?
correlation. As you know, when a job is created, there's many factors that come into play, right?
I think
Companies
for-
make
for
investment
$5.5
opportunities
billion,
where they
we
want to
should
invest,
be able to
different
say-
levels of government, if they're looking.
So outside of the fact that they couldn't tell me off the bat how much money they were spending on corporations at a meeting on Main estimates, which is like kind of basic job, what really concerned me was that they couldn't tell me how many jobs were going to be created off of that money. And I mean, you saw it for yourself. He couldn't tell you anything about what industries they'd be created in, what provinces, any sort of strategy around that. It was just, really buzzword generator sort of stuff. So let's for a minute believe that his 50,000 number is true, which I find hard to believe because I don't think, if I had had more time, I would have pressed him on what sort of econometric modeling he was using to actually show job creation off of this. But they only give us a certain amount of time to question these guys for good reason. But let's say it's true, 50,000 jobs. So $5.5 billion divided by 50,000, roughly about $110,000 per job, without being able to say where those jobs are, how permanent they are, if they're even in Canada. I mean, $110,000 is a lot of money. I don't know. It's just one of these things where we really have to be holding the Liberals to account because they use spending your money, that metric, like, well, we spent so many millions of dollars, as an answer to questions. And government spending isn't a metric in and of itself, right? I mean, like if you came to me and you're like, Michelle, well, can you come and, I know this is municipal, can you fix the pothole in front of my street? And I said, I spent $7 million. But the pothole was still outside of the front of your house. Like, I mean, like the same thing. Like, if you came to me and was like, Michelle, have you fixed that light bulb in the kitchen or something? And I was like, I spent $5.5 billion and it still didn't work. I mean, like, spending isn't a metric, right? You should be able to say, well, I spent X amount of dollars. This was the most efficient way that I spent something. Oh, and I got the pothole fixed, or I got the light bulb fixed. And the conversation that we're having now is not even about how efficiently they're spending money to an outcome. We're just trying to have a conversation about if they have any outcomes for spending whatsoever. And that's what's so dangerous about Justin Trudeau's deficit budget, is he's spending so much money to do so little. You've heard them, they don't have any sort of announcements about outcomes of spending. And when they do, they're very minor and they often take credit for the work the private sector has done. And actually, a perfect example of this was when Justin Trudeau was taking all those pictures at the airport a couple of years ago with refugees. Many of those were privately sponsored by families who had raised money across the country. So you know, this is one of these things where I encourage you to have a more direct connection to government. You know, government has become so ubiquitous in so many parts of our lives. It's just ever present. But if we're not actively questioning why the government is spending tax dollars, like for what purpose, what did it get done? If we're not even doing that, these guys are just going to keep spending your money and, you know, listening to lobbyists and stuff rather than actually getting stuff done. And that's concerning to me. We should always be able to say what the outcome of our actions are, and you know, don't expect anybody to get it perfect 100% of the time, but certainly we're not seeing what those results are for all of that spending from Justin Trudeau, and increasing your taxes at the same time too. I'm going to keep holding these guys to account, working hard for you in Ottawa. Have a great day.